All right, so here we go. Johnny Tremain by Esther Forbes. Illustrated by Lynd Ward and published by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. So this is Chapter 4, The Rising Eye, Section 1. And we have a great picture here. Thank you, Lynd Ward, for all the illustrations. The Rising Eye. It was past dawn when he woke. Remember, Johnny is sleeping in the graveyard where his mother's grave is close by. It was past dawn when he woke, his feeling of contentment still in him. He was no longer his own problem, but Merchant Lynd's. It's like he's turned himself over already in his mind. Tomorrow at this time, what would he be calling him? Uncle Jonathan? Cousin Lynd? Perhaps Grandpa? And he laughed out loud, LOL. Only imagine how Mrs. Lapham would come running, dropping nervous curtsies when he drove up in that ruby coach. How Madge and Dorcas would stare. First thing he did would be to take Scylla for a drive. He'd not even invite Isana. But how she would bawl when left behind. So you can tell he's really hurt by Isana's comment. And then his imagination jumped ahead. At the Charlestown ferry slip, he washed in the cold sea water, and because the sun was warm, sunned himself as he did what he could to make his shabby clothes presentable. He combed his lank, fair hair with his fingers, cleaned his nails with his teeth. Of course, now he could buy Scylla that pony and cart, and Grandpa Lapham, oh, he'd buy him a Bible with print an inch high in it. Mrs. Lapham? Not a thing, madam, not one thing. Christ's Church said 10 o'clock. He got up and started for Long Wharf, where his great relative had his counting house. On his way, he passed down Salt Lane. There was the comical little painted man observing Boston through his tiny spyglass. Johnny wanted to stop, tell that fellow, that Rab, of his great connections, but decided to wait until he was sure of his welcome into the Lynd family. Although half of him was leaping ahead, imagining great things for himself, the other half was wary. It was quite possible he would get no welcome at all, and he knew it. He walked half the length of Long Wharf until he saw, carved over a door, the familiar Rising Eye. The door was open, but he knocked. None of the three clerks sitting on their high stools with their backs to him, scratching in ledgers, looked up, so he stepped inside. Now that he had to speak, he found there was a barrier across his throat, something that he would have to struggle to get his voice over. He was more excited than he had realized, but he was scornful too. These three clerks would not even look up when he came in today. But tomorrow, what would it be? Good morning, little master. I'll tell your uncle, cousin, grandfather, whatever, that you're here, sir. So he's living rich in his imagination. Finally, a well-fed, rosy youth, keeping one finger in his ledger, like I do with my pencil, so I don't lose my place, swung around and asked him what he wanted. It's a personal matter between myself and Mr. Lynd. Well, said the young man pleasantly, even if it is personal, you'd better tell me what it is. It is a family matter. I cannot, in honor, tell anyone except Mr. Lynd. One of the elderly clerks laughed in a mean way. Just another poor suitor for the hand of Miss Lavinia. The young clerk flushed. Johnny had seen enough of Madge and Dorcas and their suitors to know that the gibe about poor boys aspiring to Miss Lavinia had gone home. Tell him, snickered the other ancient spider of a clerk, that Mr. Lynd is sensible of the great honor and regrets to say he has formed other plans for his daughter's future. Evidently, he mimicked Mr. Lynd. The young clerk was scarlet. He flung down his pen. Can't you ever forget that? He protested. Here, kid, and turned to Johnny. Mr. Light's closeted behind that door with 2 of his sea captains. When they leave, you just walk in. Johnny sat modestly on a stool, his arrogant, shabby hat in his good hand, and looked about him. The 3 backs were bent once more over the ledgers. The quill pens scratched. He heard the gritting of sand as they blotted their pages. There was a handsome half-model of a ship on the wall. Sea chests, doubtless full of charts, maps, invoices, were under the desks. The door opened. 2 ruddy men with swaying walks stepped out, and Mr. Light himself was shaking hands, bidding them success on their voyaging and God's mercy. As he turned to go back to his sanctuary, Johnny followed him. Mr. Light sat himself in a red leather armchair beside an open window. Through that window he could watch his Western Star graving in the graving dock. He would have been a handsome man with his fine dark eyes, bushy black brows, contrasting smartly with the white tie wig he wore, except for the color and quality of his flesh. It was as yellow as tallow. Seemingly it had melted and run down. The lids were heavy over the remarkable eyes. The melted flesh made pouches between them. It's like real deep sags under his eyes. It hung down along his jawbone under his jutting chin. "What is it?" he demanded. "Who let you in? What do you want? And who, for heaven's sake, are you?" "Sir," said Johnny, "I'm Jonathan Light Tremain." There was a long pause. The merchant's glittering black eyes did not waver, nor the tallow cheeks redden. If the name meant anything to him, he did not show it. "Well?" "My mother, sir." The boy's voice shook slightly. "She told me, she always said—" Mr. Light opened his jeweled snuff box, took snuff, sneezed, blew his nose. "I can go on from there, boy. Your mother on her deathbed told you you were related to the rich Boston merchant?" Johnny was sure now Mr. Light knew of the relationship. "Yes, sir, she did, but I didn't know you'd know." "No, I didn't need to know. It's a very old story, a very old trick. And will you be gone, or shall I have you flung out?" "I'll stay," Johnny said stubbornly. "Sewell." The merchant did not raise his voice, but instantly the young clerk was on his threshold. "Show him out." "Sewell, and happens he lands in the water. You can baptize him with my name." Mr. Light took up a handful of papers. The incident was over. Sewell looked at Johnny, and Johnny at Sewell. The young man was as kind as his cherubic face suggested, like an angel. "I can prove to you one thing, Mr. Light. My name is Jonathan Light Tremain." "What of it? Any back-alley drabtail can name her child for the greatest men in the colony. There should be a law against it, but there is none." Johnny's temper began to go. "You flatter yourself. What have you ever done except be rich? Why, I doubt even a monkey mother would name a monkey child after you." Uh-oh. Mr. Light gave a long whistle. That was quite a mouthful. "Sewell." "Yes, sir." "You just take this monkey child of a monkey mother out and drown it." "Yes, sir." Sewell put a soft hand on the boy's shoulder, but Johnny fiercely shook himself free. "I don't want your money," he said more proudly than accurately. "Now that I've met you face to face, I don't much fancy you as kin." "Your manners, my boy, are a credit to your mother." "But facts are facts, and I've a cup with your arms on it to prove what I say is true." Johnny brought the cup. The merchant's unhealthy, brilliant eyes quivered and glittered. "You've got a cup of mine?" "No, of mine." So, you've got a cup. Will you describe it?" Johnny described it as only a silversmith could. "Why, Mr. Light, that must be," Sewell began. But Mr. Light hushed him. "Shh!" Evidently only Mr. Light. Not only Mr. Light, but his clerks had heard of this cup. Johnny was elated. That means very happy. "My boy," said the merchant, "you have brought me great news. I must see your cup." Oh, he didn't bring it. That's right. "Anytime you say, sir." "My long-lost cup, returned to me by my long-lost little whatever you are." He had taken more snuff. "Bring your cup to me tonight. You know my Beacon Hill house." "Yes, sir." "And we'll kill the fatted calf, you long-lost whatever you are. Come an hour after candles are lit. Prodigal son. What? Got a cup, has he?" That's the end of section 1. And I am going to continue with section 2, since we have enough time, and this is short. Section 2. Although Johnny might have been more cordially received by Merchant Light, that means Merchant Light was quite rude, he was satisfied enough with his welcome to build up air castles. Oh, he's dreaming big time. He really knew they were air castles, for at bottom he was hard-headed, not easily taken in even by his own exuberant imagination. Still, as he trudged up Fish Street, turned in at the Lapham's door, in his mind he was in that ruby coach, money and a watch in his pocket. He had hoped to slip to the attic and fetch away his cup without being noticed, but Mrs. Lapham saw him enter and called him into the kitchen. She said nothing about his shoes. Evidently, the girls had told her his story, and she had believed it. "Johnny, you come set a moment. No, girls, you needn't leave. I want you to hear what I'm going to say." Johnny looked a little smug. Had he not almost arrived in the light coach? Again, he's dreaming about how far above them he is. "Grandpa says as long as he lives, you are to have a place to sleep. But you've got to go back to the attic. Mr. Tweedy's to have the birth and death room, and you can have a little somewhat to eat. I've agreed that that's all right. I'll manage, somehow." "Don't fret. I'm going for good." "I'll believe that when I see it. Now mind, I've 2 things to say to you." The 4 girls were all sitting about, hands folded as though they were at meeting. "First, you shan't insult Mr. Tweedy, least not until he has signed the contract." Remember, she's all about that contract. "No more talk of his being a spinster aunt dressed up in men's clothes, and no more squeak pigs. He's sensitive. You hurt his feelings horribly. He almost took ship, then and there, back to Baltimore." "I'm sorry. Secondly, there's to be no more talk of you and Scylla. Don't you ever dare to lift your eyes to one of my girls again." "Lift my eyes? I can't see that far down into the dirt even to know they are there." "Now, you saucebox, you hold that tongue of yours. You're not to go hanging round Scylla, giving her presents, and dear knows how you got the money. I've told her to keep shy of you. Now, I'm telling you, you mark my words." "Ma'am, I wouldn't marry that sniveling, goggle-eyed frog of a girl, even though you gave her to me on a golden platter. Fact is, I don't like girls, nor with a black look at his mistress, women either. And that goes for Mr. Tweedy, too." Whoa. He left to go upstairs for his cup. When he came down, the more capable women of the household were out in the yard hanging up the wash. Scylla was paring apples in that deft, absent-minded way she did such things. Isano was eating the parings. She'd be sick before nightfall. Scylla lifted her pointed, translucent little face. Her hazel eyes, under their veil of long lashes, had a greenish flash to them. There never was a less goggle-eyed girl. He's just saying things to insult. He doesn't mean a word of it. "Johnny's mad," she said sweetly. "His ears are red. He's mad," Isana chanted. These words sounded wonderful to him. It's just like before. He was happy because once more they were insulting him. They were not pitying him or being afraid of him because he had had an accident. Goggle-eyed, sniveling frogs. Remember, this is just how they had behaved before, insulting each other. With his silver cup in its flannel bag, he set off to kill time until he might take it to Mr. Light. He spent a couple of hours dreaming of his rosy future. And the tears in Merchant Light's unhealthy, brilliant black eyes, the tremor in his pompous matter of speech as he clutched his long-lost whatever you are to his costly waistcoat. Even if he did not like women, Miss Lavinia, he decided, was to kiss him on the brow. Through this dreaming, he felt enough confidence in his good fortune at last to stop in to see that Rab. There had not been a day since the first meeting that he had not wanted to. Rab showed no surprise either over his return or the strange story that he proceeded to pour out. Yes, it was nightfall, and, as Johnny hoped, Uncle Lauren and the little Webbs were gone. Rab was waiting for the ink to dry on the Observer so he could fold it. He sat with his long legs stretched before him, his hands clasped behind his neck. "Light's crooked, you know," he said at last. "I've heard that before." "He's sly. When the merchants agreed not to import any English goods until the Stamp Act was repealed, he was one of the first to sign. Then imported secretly. Sold through another name. Made more money. Sam Adams spoke to him privately, scared him. He says he won't do that again. He's trying to ride 2 horses, Whig and Tory. And a Whig is a patriot, okay? Johnny's life with the Laphams had been so limited he knew little of the political strife which was turning Boston into 2 armed camps. But we know about that because we know about the Patriots and the Tories. The Whigs declaring that taxation without representation is tyranny. The Tories believing all differences could be settled with time, patience, and respect for government. And when we say government, we're talking about the king, royalty, and Parliament in England. Rab obviously was a Whig. "I can stomach some of the Tories," he went on, "men like Governor Hutchinson. They honestly think we're better off to take anything from the British Parliament. Let them break us down, stamp in our faces, take all we've got by taxes, and never protest. They say we American colonies are too weak to get on without England's help and guidance. But Governor Hutchinson's a good man. Of course, we'll destroy him. We've marked him down. Sam Adams is already greasing the ways under him. But I can't stand men like Light, who care nothing for anything except themselves and their own fortune, playing both ends against the middle. I'd never have picked him for a relative, but beggars can't be choosers, and happens I'm a beggar." This is Johnny speaking. "It's on to time to get ready to go to him." Understanding Johnny's unspoken desire not to appear too meanly before the great gentleman, Rab went to the attic above the shop where he slept and came down with a clean shirt of finest white linen and a fawn-colored corduroy jacket with silver buttons. "It's too small for me. Ought to about fit you." It did. Almost miraculously, for Johnny had not seen where it came from. Bread and cheese were on the counter. It was his first food since yesterday's gorging. With the straight, fair hair well brushed and tied behind with taffeta, that's a nice ribbon of silky fabric, the handsome jacket, the frilled, immaculate shirt, Johnny did cut a very presentable figure. By the printing shop clock, the sun had been set for almost an hour. Rab was folding newspapers. "You can sleep here," he said, "if they don't offer you anything. But good luck, bold fellow." be a subscriber and catch the rest of the story. See you on the next video.